So with that, I will be introducing myself today. Again, my name is Amanda Duran. I'm the program coordinator for the Ohio Bird Conservation Initiative. I also serve as the co-coordinator for the Lights Out Columbus program. I've been with OBCI for about 2 years now, and I haven't had the opportunity to meet many of you, but I'm always looking forward to the opportunity to interact with our partners. So I will be happy to share with you my contact information at the end of the webinar. So today's topic is finding solutions to window collisions. We're going to talk about some home remedies to window collisions, kind of the magnitude of this problem, and then also discuss our Lights Out Columbus program that we have here in Central Ohio, as well as our monitoring program. So before I discuss some of the potential solutions to the problem of window collisions, I thought it was really important that we recognize the scale of this problem. The research is still continuing in this area, but our best estimate back in 2006 was that about 1 billion birds are killed annually by collisions with building and glass. So obviously this is a huge number and suggests that collisions may be the single greatest source of mortality for birds in the U.S. But I think to really understand the threat of building collisions for birds, we have to recognize that this problem is very complicated. It spans both day and night, as well as urban, suburban, and rural environments. So let's start by discussing the threat of nighttime collisions. I get asked a lot of questions from the public, wondering why our birds are even out flying at night in the first place. But in fact, most of our songbirds actually do migrate at night. They do this for reasons including avoiding predators, the ability to then feed during the day, and also reduced wind resistance at night. So let's start by trying to consider these nighttime conditions that these migratory pathways evolved under. So we're likely picturing a dark, star-filled sky like the one here. But unfortunately, as most of us know, in many places, artificial light has really drowned out these stars. This drastic alteration to the night sky has significant effects on nocturnally migrating birds. The birds are attracted to this light, which can cause them to fly at lower altitudes. And when this doesn't lead to a building collision in itself, some birds are just drawn down into the city, and then they'll spend the night in whatever limited cover they're able to find there. Upward-facing lights, they're also particularly problematic for birds. So once the birds fly into this beam of light, they're very hesitant to fly back out into the darkness. So in most cases, they will kind of circle in this beam of light until the morning, or until, unfortunately, they might fall from exhaustion. There are also some weather conditions which can intensify the effects of nighttime lighting. So foggy conditions often will cause birds to fly at a lower altitude in search of better visibility, which can make them more susceptible to the effects of lighting and also more likely just to collide with a building directly. And this increased moisture in the air when it's foggy also reflects the light, so it will increase the glow that surrounds any of our lit buildings. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, the threats of collisions don't end when the sun comes up. For those birds that were drawn down into the city overnight, now the morning brings this whole host of new threats. So glass is now the most significant problem. In particular, glass that's very reflective, so it might reflect the sky, as you see here in this picture on the left, or it might be reflecting vegetation. It's really imperceptible to the birds, and it can lead them to collide with the glass because they just think that they're seeing the sky or that they're seeing that tree. They don't realize that it's actually a reflection in the glass. Also, as you see here on the right, vegetation behind glass is a serious problem because birds don't recognize that there's a layer of glass separating them from what they see as a refuge or some cover that they're trying to fly to. And in fact, people don't see the glass either. What we see is the window frame and the door frame. We see these external cues that tell us, hey, there's a pane of glass there, or there's a glass door there. And of course, birds are not able to recognize these external cues. So all they see is the tree in the lobby. They don't see the pane of glass that they would unfortunately collide with before reaching it. And this threat exists in these urban environments at the large buildings, but it also exists at our homes and at smaller buildings. So now that we understand this threat, we can start to talk about some possible solutions to building collisions. So first I'll discuss some methods for preventing window collisions at your home, and then I'll move into discussing lights out programs, including the one that we have here in Columbus. Now there's a general rule that we try to follow when preventing window collisions, and it's the 2x4 rule, as it's called. Most birds will not attempt to fly through horizontal space that's less than 2 inches high or vertical space that's less than 4 inches wide. So it's really important to keep this rule in mind when we're trying to implement any of the prevention methods that I'm going to be talking about in the coming slides. So with that 2x4 rule in mind, let's consider this one of the most commonly used methods to prevent window collisions. And I'm sure you've all seen it, and that's window decals. So it's very common to see, especially these cutouts of a bird or a hawk, and people will put just one decal in the corner of the window or the center of the window, and they'll believe that the bird will either see this other bird and not fly towards the window, or they'll recognize that there's glass there because of this single decal. But if we, again, consider this 2x4 rule, an effective application of window decals would actually look more like this photo here on the left. And for those of you who are from the Columbus area, you'll probably recognize this building here. This is the Grange Insurance Audubon Center. And if you look closely at some of the windows here on this building, they're using an effective method of applying window decals. So it really is a much more tightly spaced application of decals than most people think is necessary to prevent the collisions. One of the easiest and least expensive methods to prevent window collisions is actually temper paint. So you can use temper paint. It's very inexpensive. It can be purchased at any arts and crafts store. And you paint it on your window in a pattern that, again, keep in mind the 2x4 rule. And you paint it on in a way that allows the bird to then see that there's something there. It's not just a reflection or transparent. And this paint will go on easily with a brush and can be removed with a sponge and water, although it will, in most cases, stay on your window even through a rain event. Another really easy solution is tape. So any opaque tape can work to prevent window collisions, but the American Bird Conservancy actually makes a product called bird tape. It's translucent, it transmits light, and it's made to last outdoors on your windows. And a 75-foot roll is only about $10, so it's also a pretty inexpensive method of preventing collisions. So if you visit their website here, abcbirdtape.org, they actually have patterns, suggested patterns on how to apply the tape to your window that will be most effective in preventing collisions. Similar to the tape, but a little more permanent and suitable for some larger surfaces, is window film. They're available in a wide variety of patterns, colors, translucencies, and we have links to many different suppliers of window films on our website in that resources page that I mentioned at obcinet.org. There's an option that avoids applying anything directly to your window, and that would be a screen or mesh fabric. The screen or the mesh should be hung at least 2 inches from the window, and this material really kind of acts in two ways. First, it acts to disrupt the reflection and transparency of the window, so it might improve the chance that the bird actually sees the window rather than seeing through it or seeing a reflection. And also, if it's hung properly with enough space in front of the window, a bird that is traveling towards the window would hit the screen first and could be cushioned from actually impacting the window through the use of this screen. So again, suppliers for this material are listed on our OBCI website in the resources section. But short of applying all these external deterrents to your windows, there are a few other things you can do that are just easy steps that you can do without having to apply anything externally to your window. The first suggestion is to move any houseplants that you might have in your window away from the window. So I mentioned earlier about how birds can see this as a refuge, see it as available cover from the outside, and not be able to perceive this pane of glass in front of the window. So it's true at lobbies of office buildings as much as it's true at your own home. So moving those plants away from directly in front of the window can really help to prevent a window collision. Not 100%, obviously. You still have issues with reflection and transparency, but it's something simple you can do. Another simple option is working with blinds or shades that you might already have on your windows. So remember back to that 2x4 rule to be able to make sure that the spacing in your blinds is adequate. But open, they can function to to allow a bird to be able to see the window, to see that there's something there that they wouldn't fly towards. Or you can also use, if you're willing to have your blinds closed, something like in this bottom photo that allows light to still pass through but is not completely transparent, will also allow the bird to be able to perceive that window. Another important solution to building collisions that I haven't really discussed here is the incorporation of bird-friendly design elements into building construction, especially in commercial buildings. So there's been a lot of really exciting advances that are being made in this area, especially being advanced by the American Bird Conservancy. One in particular is that there is a pilot program now for LEED credits, or credits to certify a building as being a green building. So there's now credits for bird-friendly design in that program. There's also been a lot of advances in bird-friendly glass. So in being able to purchase glass that already has some sort of UV coating or something on it that allows birds to see it, but to the naked eye of a human, it still appears to be clear. So there's still sort of restrictions on that. It's not widely available commercially yet, just because there hasn't been as much of a high demand for it. But we hope that moving forward, that architects will be considering bird-friendly design elements in these new buildings that they're constructing. So if you would like to learn more about bird-friendly design, I really encourage you to check out these two excellent publications, Bird-Friendly Building Design by the American Bird Conservancy, and also Bird Safe Building Guidelines by New York City Audubon. And again, both of those are available, links to those in the resources section of our website. So all of the potential solutions we've discussed so far today really operate at a small scale, at the one building scale. And the majority of window collisions do occur at homes, and collectively all these steps can really have a significant conservation impact. But we must also consider other sources of window collisions if we're really going to tackle this issue. So as I mentioned previously, many birds migrate at night, and the lights on tall buildings or aimed at the sky, those upward-facing lights, can disorient them and draw them down into the city and lead to problems with collisions. I think this quote from a building owner in Chicago provides a really chilling illustration of this problem. He says, "We were cleaning the birds off the roof by the shovelful." So it was experiences like that one that led to the start of the first Lights Out program in the U.S., which was in Chicago in 1999. Lights Out programs provide an opportunity to reduce these collision-related kills, but also to reduce energy usage, and that's through educating building owners, managers, and residents to reduce their nighttime lighting. So this picture here is from the Lights Out Chicago program. It's a pretty cool comparison. Photos were both taken on the same day, and the first photo was taken just before 11 p.m., and 11 p.m. is the start time for Lights Out Chicago. And the second photo was taken just a few minutes after 11. So you can see, of course, there's still an urban glow. There's still a lot of light coming from the city, but there is also a visible reduction in the lighting, especially on these upper floors and those really problematic upward-facing lights. So this photo is a comparison. It's a pretty good way to visualize exactly the types of reduction in lighting we're trying to accomplish through our Lights Out programs. And of course, you can't talk about Lights Out programs and building collisions without talking about the Fatal Light Awareness Program, or FLAP. FLAP was formed in 1993, and they were really the first organization in the world to look at this issue of building collisions for birds. And since they started, they've collected a vast amount of data on bird collisions in Toronto, and their monitoring program there really served as the model for the monitoring program we developed here in Columbus, which I'll get into in a few minutes. Their website, if you're interested in data about how many collisions are occurring and what species are affected, I really recommend you visit their website. It's flap.org. So since that first Lights Out program in Chicago, Lights Out programs are now established in a number of different cities across the U.S., as you can see here on this map, including Minneapolis, New York, Indianapolis, and with the support of many local partners. The Ohio Bird Conservation Initiative partnered with the Grange Insurance Audubon Center to start the first Lights Out and associated monitoring program here in Columbus in March of 2012. So Lights Out programs have so many benefits, both for birds and for people. And of course, we're focused on the fact that reducing nighttime lighting can reduce nighttime collisions and save birds. But it's also important to consider that when you're working with building owners and managers, that might not always be the top thing that they're concerned with. So we have to look also at benefits that are really going to get their attention and encourage them to enroll in the program. So the top on a lot of their lists is saving energy, which directly translates to saving them money. A lot of the buildings enrolled in our program have started doing the Lights Out reductions year-round because they realize how much money they have been saving by doing these reductions in nighttime lighting. And of course, with saving energy goes along with that is reductions in CO2 emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. Another important factor for a lot of our buildings, particularly our businesses that are enrolling in these programs, is the boost in public relations. They see a lot of positive press related to the Lights Out program, and they also are able to be seen as a green company, a green building. So publicizing and sharing with the public the buildings that are enrolled and all of the efforts that they're taking related to Lights Out programs is really a strong benefit for many of the buildings that are enrolled in the program. So when we say that we want them to reduce nighttime lighting, what exactly do we mean by that? Well, here in Columbus, we've determined our Lights Out period to be 11 p.m. to dawn, which it's similar to a lot of other different Lights Out programs across the country. And based on our peak migration periods for birds, and we went back through years of migration data to determine these specific dates for Columbus, and again, those are probably different for many other Lights Out cities, but for us it's for the spring, March 15th through June 1st, and for the fall, August 15th through October 31st. And for our lighting guidelines, we're able to share with the building owners how they should go about trying to reduce their nighttime lighting and where they should prioritize keeping lights on and where they should really re-examine whether or not they need certain lights on at night. And the highest priority for us for turning lights out is exterior architectural lighting. So upward-facing lights, we discussed how those are so problematic. Well, most of these architectural lights are upward-facing, sort of highlighting an architectural feature on the building, at the tops of buildings with colorful lights lighting up the very top of the building, or highlighting a specific feature or a wall or something like that. That these lights don't have any sort of safety purposes, and they're while to many buildings they're part of the identity of the building to have that particular lighting. So that's something we have to work with the building owners and managers on. But that's the highest priority for us, for having exterior architectural lighting turned off. The next type of lighting we focus on is turning off interior lights, especially on those upper floors. And this has a lot to do with some behavioral changes at the building. And it's an issue for some of our participants that may have 24-hour employees. We actually had some of our buildings that shifted the floors where their 24-hour employees worked from the top of their tower down to the bottom of their building, so that the lighting wasn't as influential on drawing birds down into the city as it would be if, say, the top floor of their building was where their 24-hour employees were working. Similarly, we had some other buildings that decided to change the direction that their cleaning crews worked in. So instead of starting at the bottom of their building and ending the evening at the top with all of the lights on at the top of the building, they'll start in the early evening at the top, and then by 11 p.m. they're moved down towards the bottom of the building. And then finally, another suggestion is to reduce or turn off lobby and atrium lighting if possible. And we recognize this is not always possible for some of our buildings, again, with 24-hour employees. But reducing the atrium lighting does really help with the contributions to the general urban glow. And then for any of our birds that have already been brought down into the city at night, they can be attracted to lit lobbies like this. So if possible, we try to encourage building owners to reduce their lobby and atrium lighting overnight. We have, as of now, we have 10 buildings participating in the Lights Out Columbus program, but we are always working to try to enroll new buildings, and our goal is to have 15 buildings by the end of Lights Out Columbus's second year, which would be the end of October of this year. But in addition to all these reductions in nighttime lighting through Lights Out Columbus, we've also gained a lot of valuable data on where and when building collisions are occurring in Columbus, and that's through our volunteer-based collision monitoring program. So for 5 months out of the year, during those peak migration periods that I showed you earlier, our volunteers 3 times a week will walk a route and look for birds that have collided with buildings. The route goes through downtown Columbus and visits 20 different buildings. Those buildings were randomly selected from within downtown Columbus, and half of those buildings are less than 50 meters tall, and half of them are taller than 50 meters. So we also wanted to try to examine the relationship between building height and nighttime lighting, as well as bird collisions. So in all, in 2012, our volunteers conducted 54 collision surveys, totaling over 81 hours of volunteer time. They found 39 different species of birds of 147 different individuals. So we're very proud of what we were able to accomplish, and our surveys were conducted primarily by 3 volunteers that really gave of their time very generously, and we wouldn't be able to have any of this data without them. So we're very thankful for all of our volunteer time. But out of these 39 species that we found, some of them were found more commonly than others. Most common species that we found was the ovenbird. We found 17 individuals of that species. We also found quite a few white-throated sparrows, Tennessee warblers, and also yellow-bellied sapsuckers. And it's really interesting that other collision monitoring programs, including the one I mentioned, Toronto, the Fatal Light Awareness Program, have found similar trends in the most commonly found species that we did. So ovenbird and white-throated sparrow are always really high up on the list of other cities. And we're not really sure why. certain bird species might be more commonly found as collision victims. We suspect it has something to do with the typical flying altitudes of those various species, that some might typically fly lower than others, and maybe that makes them more susceptible to building collisions and also the effects of nighttime lighting. But again, we're not sure on that, and more research needs to be done to understand why some species are found much more commonly as colliding with buildings. And here's a list of some other species just to give you an idea of the variety that we found. Lots of warbler species, and so you can see the pictures here, the American redstart and common yellowthroat, just to give you an idea of some of the other species that we were encountering. Another goal of our collision monitoring program was to better understand the relationship between nighttime lighting and bird collisions. So to understand this better, our volunteers also did weekly nighttime light surveys at the same buildings that they surveyed for collisions during the day. So they visited those buildings and took photos of each of them after 11 p.m. Because that was the start time of Lights Out Columbus. So each of those photos, we analyzed them using a program called Analyzing Digital Images. And using that program, we were able to generate a masked image of the lighted parts of the building. So on this slide, the photo on the left is the original photo taken by our volunteers. And then on the right is the masked image generated by our program, showing just the lighted pixels on the building. So by comparing these lighted pixels to the unlit pixels within the area of the building, we're able to calculate an average illumination percentage for that building. So we multiplied that percentage by the height of the building to kind of calculate a light index value. And the relationship that we found between our light index and the number of birds that we found at the building was actually really interesting. So when we compared the number of birds found at a building with the average light index of that building, or how brightly lit it was at those nighttime surveys, we found a positive relationship. So that means that we found more birds at the buildings that were more brightly lit. And this is such an important finding, because if we are able to reduce nighttime lighting through Lights Out Columbus, then this data supports that we're also likely to be reducing the number of bird collisions that are occurring. If you are interested in learning more about the methods and results of Lights Out Columbus and our collision monitoring program, there's a program report available in the additional resources section that I mentioned earlier at our website, which again is obcinet.org. Also, keep an eye out for our next report on the data that we're currently collecting now in spring 2013, and we hope to have that report available in June. So I mentioned how many partners were involved in Lights Out Columbus, and I have to acknowledge all of them here, primarily the Grange Insurance Audubon Center. Ann Baylog, their conservation manager, served as the other co-coordinator of Lights Out Columbus, and her assistance has been invaluable. And also here are the names of our volunteers that have contributed to our Lights Out Columbus monitoring program data. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions that you might have. The easiest way to submit your questions is probably through the chat box down in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. And I do see that I have one question here from earlier in the webinar, and that question is, are most collisions at night or during the day? And I would say that generally most collisions probably occur during the day, and the risk of the nighttime lighting is primarily that it draws birds down into the city and can lead to them then being there during the early part of the day and colliding with the glass. So that's not to say that collisions don't happen at night, that birds certainly do collide with buildings while they're flying and as they're being drawn down into the city. But I think primarily the majority of those collisions are occurring during the day due to threats that I mentioned to glass and issues with reflection and transparency. So are there any other questions that anyone had? I have a question here. Are you encountering any issues with building owners allowing access to the properties? So we've actually had a lot of positive interactions with our building owners. We were very upfront from the beginning in that this data is being used primarily to help guide the implementation of Lights Out Columbus, and it's not in any way being used to attack the building owners and come to them and show this is what we're finding at your building. But of course we had concerns with whether or not they would be reluctant to have us on their property. So the majority of the building owners I contacted said, it's public property, you're on the sidewalk, there's nothing we can do to prevent you from being there. But we've tried to move to a much more positive place than that with many of them, as far as even working with some of their cleaning staff to ask them what birds they find, because they're often the first ones that get there. They're the first ones that are out in the morning and are finding these birds and sweeping them up before we can get there. So we've tried to move past the relationship of just we're policing them to we're working with them to try to find solutions to why they're having these dead birds outside their buildings. Another question here, are migratory bird species more vulnerable than year-round species? And that's an interesting question. We actually found a lot more resident bird species that were victims of collisions than we perhaps expected. But when you consider the fact that birds, they can't really get used to glass. So it's not an issue. They're not going to learn to be able to see window frames and door frames. So migratory species are certainly the ones we're focused on as far as susceptibility to nighttime lighting and issues with being drawn into the city as they're migrating. But as far as daytime collisions go, migratory and resident species are equally vulnerable to all of the issues with reflective glass and transparency. Okay, so our next question here is, are you working with building owners on the Lights Out program, and are you also offering the recommendations, remediation recommendations you discussed with us today? We are working with building owners on Lights Out Columbus. We work with them through the Building Owners and Managers Association, or BOMA, here in Columbus. And we've also had a lot of success with just calling them directly and meeting with them one-on-one. But we've stayed really focused on the issue of nighttime lighting with them. We haven't really been able to broach the subject of daytime collisions, because in a lot of cases that's a lot more significant visual alterations to their building than just turning the lights out. So that's sort of a next step for us, is trying to progress towards being able to open the discussion of how do they prevent daytime collisions as well. And these remediation recommendations that I presented today, they'll all be available through my PowerPoint on the website, but they're also very well captured in a pamphlet that's in the resources section on our website that was produced by the American Bird Conservancy. That is excellent summary and photos of how to prevent window collision. So I recommend, if you're interested in sharing that through your organization or something like that, that you check that out on our website. So next question here is, how much does feeder location affect collisions? And the consideration of where you place your feeder is actually very important as far as preventing collisions. There's sort of a danger zone of placement where we want the feeder to either be very close to the window so that birds can not get up enough speed when they're leaving it to collide with the window, or we want it to be very far away from the window so that it's not an issue. I'm not sure on the exact distances off the top of my head, but I seem to remember at least 10 feet away from a window for a proper placement, or within 2 feet of a window. So that's sort of what we recommend as far as trying to reduce the risk of collisions for feeders. But certainly when you're placing your feeder, take a step back and consider the window that's facing that feeder if you have one, and what you can do at that particular window where birds might be coming up to it more commonly than other windows at your home, and that might be a great place to start implementing some of these prevention measures. Here we have the next comment. There's a recent legal decision in Toronto regarding light emissions and causing death and injury to migratory birds and species at risk. And that was a really landmark case that Paloma is discussing. And it had to do with buildings being responsible for the birds that die as a result of the lighting that they are emitting. So looking at light as sort of an emission along with something that a company would emit into the water or emit into the air. It's set a really interesting precedent, and I definitely encourage you to check that out. I will put a link to that decision as well on our website so that when you go to our site, you can take a look at that decision as well. We have another idea for home windows. Let kids color pages from stained glass coloring books and hang them in a window. These coloring books have some really nice pictures, and it's fun for the kids to color and have their pictures hung up. That's a great idea. I've seen also photos from, for instance, some daycares or schools where they have big plate glass windows, and they'll put all kinds of kids' art up in the window. So it's not as sad as putting a solid piece of paper up. It's bright and vibrant and great to see from the outside, and especially those stained glass pictures would probably be wonderful because they would also let the light in as well. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you. On sliding patio doors, how would you close? How close to the floor do you need to protect? I haven't heard anything about specific distances to protect up from the ground, but I would say, just like any other window, I would keep in mind the 2x4 rule, and I would try to not go too much higher than 2 inches off the ground as far as leaving it open. You know, of course, birds are not going to be flying right at ground level, but without having solid information on how far up they would be flying, I would say it's best to play it safe and probably stick to that 2x4 rule. Okay, I got another comment here again to say about that legal decision with the birds dealing with light emissions from the buildings. If you have any specific questions, you can contact FLAP or that Fatal Light Awareness Program at flap.org for more details. Another suggestion for a possible solution is soaping the outside of a window, which I think would probably give the same type of look as the temper paint. But again, another quick, easy, cheap solution to preventing window collisions. Well, great. Thanks so much for all of your questions and comments. And feel free to continue submitting those as we're here, and I'll keep an eye out to see if any additional questions come up. But I wanted to remind you again, if you're interested, to visit our website and register for next month's webinar hosted by Tim Daniel from the Ohio Division of Wildlife on wildlife photography and some tips on taking better photos. I also would, if you're able, encourage you to take our very quick 4-question survey here at the end of the webinar. Just give us some information about how you heard about us and help us to continue to reach new folks that might be interested in our program. And then also, if you're interested, I can add you to our list so that you'll continue to receive updates or not updates, but invitations to upcoming webinars. And the presentation will be available to download on our website at the webinar section of obcinet.org. And are there any wavelengths of light that are invisible to humans but visible to birds? So light in the UV spectrum is invisible to humans but visible to birds, and that has been a great tool in trying to prevent window collisions. So a lot of that bird-friendly glass and some of the window films are designed so that they reflect UV light in a way that is visible to birds but not visible to humans. So that's a very important distinction in the way that we see things, that is a tool in being able to produce, hopefully even more so in the future, materials that are imperceptible to humans but make all of the difference to birds trying to be able to view that window. All right, well, thank you again, and please hang on the line here, and you'll get a link to fill out our short survey on our webinar today. So visit our website by the end of the week for the recording of this page, and you can share it with all of your friends that might be interested in preventing window collisions at your home. So thank you again, everyone, for attending, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar.